It's mechanically mediocre.
Crap.
You're listening to the Theology of Games podcast, your source for gaming news, reviews, and interviews with the top voices in the industry. Find us online at theologyofgames.com. And now, here are your hosts, Scott Firestone and Jeremiah Isley.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to podcast number 3 for the Theology of Games blog. And
the third in a series of
who knows?
More than 3.
Probably.
Yes, definitely.
Unless they shut us down. The FCC calls and says we're done.
Does the FCC have control over podcasts?
I don't know.
I'm going to say probably not.
Okay.
But, who knows? Anyway, hey, I'm Jeremiah Isley.
I'm Scott Firestone.
Yeah, he's Scott. And we are the Theology of Games guys. And we have a jam-packed podcast episode for you this week. This month. We don't do this every week. That's just crazy talk. Yeah. But hey, we're going to talk about games we're playing with our kids, games that we've played recently, some news pieces, and we have a very special guest with us this week. We are bringing in Jason Tagmeyer, designer extraordinaire. He brought us Pixel Lincoln, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's jump in. What do you say?
I say, let's talk about news. There's
Cool.
nothing huge happening right now, but one thing we noticed was there's yet another Carcassonne expansion that's coming out called Carcassonne Sudsy.
Sudsy? Is it like a car wash or?
No, it's some sort of tropical island.
I'm pretty sure there's like an accent over one of those vowels.
Sudsy?
So it's like, right. It's something like that. And it's not even so much that it's yet another expansion, but it's another edition or iteration or theme.
Like a
so
reboot.
Yeah, right. So it is actually a full base version of Carcassonne with just yet another theme. There's the original Carcassonne, there's the one that's New Frontiers, where it's the American settlements, and now this one, and they are doing Hunter, yeah, that's the one. And then there's also coming out around Thanksgiving, I believe, is the Christmas edition, complete with gingerbread meeples. So our question to each other and to you, the listeners, do you feel Carcassonne is kind of jumping the Monopoly / Settlers of Catan shark here? Are they trying to ride this one out as much as they can by retheming and so on? In a way, I kind of think they are. What do you think?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, more than yes. I mean, I don't blame them at all. I'm sure Carcassonne is one of their, if not their biggest money makers. So it's something that if most people have played, if they played any kind of Euro game, they've played Carcassonne or Settlers. So for them to come out with these new editions, I mean, I get it from a financial standpoint, but as a gamer, I don't think I'm in their market anymore because I stopped caring about Carcassonne a long time ago, and I really like Carcassonne. It's a good game. I've enjoyed playing it with my family, and it's easy to pick up. Non-gamers get it. It's really good, but I just stopped caring. I don't need all of the little iterations, and then here's an expansion with one tile. Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, I have several of the expansions, and we don't play many of the expansions. I will say, I agree. Yes, I think they are kind of just trying to milk this franchise, if that's the word we're going to use. But it's I don't need all of those. I will say I am interested in, and if anybody's listening and wants to get me a Christmas present, I would like the Christmas version, but I'm a Christmas junkie, so
Sucker.
yeah, exactly. But gingerbread meeples, okay, I'm falling for it. But yeah, it's. I'll say this: if you put Carcassonne, Monopoly, or Settlers of Catan in front of me, I will play Carcassonne 100 times out of 100
Yes.
over those other two.
Yes.
It's a great game. It plays fast. My wife loves it. My kids love it. Anybody I've ever put it on the table with enjoys it. But again, why do I need several themes of the same game? The original theme is great. It's just a standard medieval city building kind of theme. I don't need to go further with that, except for the Christmas one.
Hollywood keeps cranking out these, not expansions, but they're sequels, because the sequels make money, because the original made money. And
right.
But what's
and as long as they
interesting-
make a little bit of money and they're not losing money, they'll just continue to do that.
Right. So, hey, we're going to hire writers to either come up with something new that may tank, or we could have them make Transformers 9, and yeah, let's do that. So,
right. Don't take any risks.
People who love movies and people who love games really want to see the new movies franchises and the branching out and taking risks. And so, I mean, this probably isn't a great example, because I don't know how many games aren't being produced because a Carcassonne game is being produced. I don't know, but just be original.
Yeah. Well, and I think Kickstarter's taking care of that for us too. We're seeing a lot more smaller independent games getting to market than maybe 5 years ago. That would be a completely different case, and all these Carcassonne iterations would be kind of clogging the market and not letting other games get into the marketplace. But yeah, I let them
just like
thing.
Indie movies. Some of those Kickstarters stink, and it's just like some of the indie movies stink.
Sure.
But yeah.
And that's the chance you take when you go with an independent publisher and you take a chance on a title. So, I say let them do their thing, but I'm kind of calling it for what it is. It's kind of beating that horse that has deceased for a while.
Says the guy who wants the Christmas edition of Carcassonne.
But I want the Christmas one because, and if they made a Star Wars one, I'd probably buy that too because, well, actually, I don't know if I would.
Yes, you would.
I probably would.
100% you would.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
You'd say it was because of your kids, but we all know the truth.
This is true. So let's move on from that conversation. But we want to hear from our listeners. Sound off on that. What do you guys think? Are you buying all these Carcassonne versions? Are you a rabid Carcassonne fan that cares about all of these, or are you just kind of meh on that? Let us know. Send us an email, drop us a line on the blog, all those fun things, and we'd love to chat with you about that. Shall we move on?
We shall.
Okay. So we like to talk every month, every episode, about games that we're playing with our family and with our children. It's been kind of a weird month. I've played a lot of games this month, but very few have been with my boys. We got this little, we got a prototype of a game called Cruddle, which is a weird little color-based tile placement game, and you're basically trying to connect corners of this board that doesn't exist. You put out these 4 colored tiles in these 4 corners that are kind of measured, and then all the tiles have 4 quadrants. There's a quadrant on them, and they're split into different colors. Some of them match, some of them don't. And you're trying to build a bridge from one corner to another, depending on these 2 colors that you were dealt at the beginning of the game. Kind of an interesting little game, and my boys really liked it. I guess one thing that I didn't like about it was a prototype, and I don't know what their plans are for a full version of it, but they were really thin, kind of papery tiles. They weren't like chunky, hard tiles. And so it was really hard sometimes to lay them and keep them in order and stuff, whereas an actual tile probably would have been a little better with that. But it was a very interesting game. And then I've been playing HeroClix with my oldest still. He's still in love with them.
Well, I have been playing, I was able to get a copy of a game called Magic Labyrinth. And it was out of print for a while, but I just read a couple of days ago that it's back in print.
Is that the one with David Bowie, or
No.
that's something different?
Oh, those tight pants. Nightmares. Anyway, no. This is a game from, I'm trying to think of who put this out. I think it was Playroom Entertainment or something like that. But it's really cool because the board sits on top of this kind of a grid, and you take little wooden pieces and you build this grid and you create a labyrinth. And then you put the board on it and you kind of spin it around so nobody knows what is where. And you have a little piece on top and then a ball bearing underneath. So the top is magnetic and the ball bearing sticks to it. And so you're moving your piece along this board. And then if it hits any of those wooden barriers, as it's moving through the quote unquote labyrinth, then it falls off and your turn is over. And so it's kind of a memory thing because you're trying to remember where the walls are and, I can get there. And so you're basically just, you reach into a bag and you draw out a little, not a tile, but like a little chit that, and there are pictures all over the board and everyone's trying to get over there and grab that chit, and then you pull a new one out and put it somewhere else on the board. And so I've figured out the strategy, which is be around the place where this chit goes down and you win the game. But so there's not a lot of strategy to it, but the kids love that game because you're trying to remember, oh, is there a wall there? I can't remember. And it's really fun and a neat little game. So it just apparently is back in print. So if you get a chance, pick up the Magic Labyrinth. It's a lot of fun for families.
Excellent.
So that's it for families. Now, what have we had on the table ourselves as the gamer table, I guess? The one I played the other day was Bora Bora. It's the new Stefan Feld game. And, he's good. He's had like 9 come out this year, but this is one of them. And it's probably, I'm guessing it's the meatiest one because I don't know how it could be any meatier. There is so much going on in this game that it's mind-boggling. The guy was teaching the rules and, okay, there's this track and there's this track and there's this track and you have to keep track of this and you're going to be adding this. And he just kept saying things and I thought, oh, surely he has to be done soon. Nope, he wasn't.
20 minutes later.
I couldn't believe it. I thought, how did he design this game? Like, oh, you know what? I don't think 7 tracks is enough. We need 2 or 3 more, and then it'll be perfect. But it's certainly people, call his game sometimes, just salad points or something like that, where there's all kinds of different ways to score victory points, and that's certainly true of this one. But man, we all really liked it. It's complex. There's tons going on. There's tons to keep track of. But we all got done with it and went, wow, that was a really great game. So Bora Bora gets a big old thumbs up from me. I'm going to be writing up a review of this one soon. It was fun.
That's very cool. Man, I've actually, since we last did an episode, played a lot. I think one of the games that stands out, though, for me has been the Duke. I have played a ton of the Duke. My gaming friends fell in love with this game right away. We got a sneak peek at it when we were at Origins, and as soon as it showed up, I opened it and started teaching it to my 7-year-old. He's started to get it. It's a little bit strategic and a lot of thinking ahead for him, but man, anybody that I've sat down with this game, it's so simple, but there's so much to it when you actually sit down and try to defeat somebody in this game. For those of you who haven't played it, It's kind of chess-like. It plays on a grid with tiles that you play, and you've got each player has a duke tile that you're trying to capture, and so you're trying to maneuver your pieces to capture these to capture this duke. But after you move, your movement options for that tile change because you flip the tile over. And so some of them can strike without moving, some of them can slide, some of them can jump over other tiles. There's just a lot of variety with it. And I find it interesting. There's a lot of expansions coming out, or already out, maybe even most of them for it. But to me, the base game is so replayable that you almost don't need those expansions. I'm interested to see them, but I almost feel like with some of the powers that they're adding to it, it might be bogging it down a little bit, because the great thing about it is you literally can teach this game to somebody in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, in fact, by the time this podcast comes out, we will have our review, both written and video review of the game out, because I mean, as soon as we played it, it was like, oh yeah, we've got to do this one fast because it's fun, just flat out fun. My game group played it half a dozen times the other night. Various people did as they were waiting for games, and everyone was like, oh man, that's a really good game. It's one of those games where you play it and immediately go, that's really elegant and simple and great.
Yeah. It's so simple. You're like, how come this game hasn't been released? Like, nobody thought of this game years ago, but it's one of those ones. It's ingenious, and I've enjoyed it a lot. Another game that I've played that we received was Nile Deluxor, and it's this nifty little card game that it's not trick taking. It's kind of set collection, but it's a great game that plays really. You don't have a lot of downtime between your turns. There's even when it's somebody else's turn, there could be stuff happening to you. You're trying to harvest crops, and you're in ancient Egypt, and you're planting fields, and then every turn somebody turns over a card, and that type of card floods. So whoever has that field has to harvest those crops. And you basically go and you exhaust the deck depending on how many players are in the game. That kind of determines how many times you exhaust the deck. And the scoring is really interesting because instead of, getting points for having multiple cards of one type of harvest, you actually sort them out, and it's hard to word this correctly, but whoever's their least amount of harvested item, whatever that would be, is the most, is who wins the game. So if my least biggest stack is 1 and your least biggest stack is 2, then you win the game. And so it's all about being well-rounded and not just trying to rack up a whole bunch of one thing because it's going to multiply your score. It's a really interesting take on how to win, because a lot of times games like this, you're like, if I just keep collecting this certain thing, it'll multiply and it'll be squared, it'll be cubed, it'll be whatever. Whereas this is, the name of the game is to be well-rounded, because you're trying to harvest a great multitude of things to feed your people through the famine and whatnot. So, interesting little game.
Reiner Knizia used that mechanism in Tigris and Euphrates, which is one of his heavy classic games. It's probably I don't know. It's probably at least 15 years old now. But he used that where whatever your least one is, that's your score. So it's a tricky mechanism for scoring.
Yeah, and it's funny because some people, when you sit down to play it the first time, that doesn't register to them. They're like, oh, well, I've got a whole bunch of this, so I'm doing good. Well, maybe not, Right. And there's a way you can actually trade in stuff that you've harvested, so you can draw more cards and try to diversify. And It's a pretty well balanced game. It's a lot of fun. You got a copy of that too. I think you'll probably enjoy it. So
yeah, I haven't had a chance to play it yet.
So what else is on your table?
We also played Forbidden Desert. It is the sequel to Forbidden Island, which is
yes.
It's based on Pandemic kind of, and Forbidden Island is the family-friendly version. So Forbidden Desert is the next iteration of this, and it's really interesting. It's, you know, in Forbidden Island, the island is sinking, and you need to try and get away. And in Forbidden Desert, it's becoming overgrown with sand, and so there are all these sand tiles, and there's a storm on the board that moves around, and as it moves around, it will pull tiles toward it and then cover those with sand. And you're still trying to figure out where are the pieces. In this case, instead of getting 4 treasures and getting off, you're trying to build the 4 pieces of it's kind of a steampunk helicopter thing to get off the, to get out of the desert there. And so you have to find the pieces for it. But
I thought that was Jabba's sail barge.
Oh, maybe it is. Yeah. I didn't. I certainly didn't see Leia in her gold bikini, but
well, it's a family game,
right? So it's more complex. There are more things going on. It feels harder to win, and but there are also some neat mechanisms. Like there are some cool special items that you get that you can. There's a sand blaster that can blow all the sand off of one tile, and there are tunnels you can hide in, because one of the things that makes it harder is everyone has a water supply that they have to keep track of. And so there's a card in there that's called the Sun Beats Down, and everyone has to drop their water down, and that's another way that you guys can die. If anybody runs out of water, they die. So you have to either give each other water, or one of the rolls lets you, get some water off of tiles, and then if you are in a tunnel when that happens, then you don't have to lower your water, and the tunnel can lead you between 2 tunnels are 1 movement point across from each other, regardless of how far on the board they are. So there are just a few extra mechanisms that make it probably the next step after Forbidden Island, but it's certainly something I thought, there's room for both of these in any collection. It's not like, oh, well, I'll never play Forbidden Island again. I can certainly see situations where I would. But Forbidden Desert was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to pick this one up.
That's cool. Yeah, I've been wanting to get my hands on that. Forbidden Island is a favorite of ours, and I told my boys that Forbidden Desert, there's another game of that type coming out, and they were super excited about it. So yeah, I'm definitely hoping to get my hands on that one soon. So this month, we're giving the game Pixel Lincoln, the deck building game, the full treatment, as it were, as we like to say. We've already posted a written and a video review, and we are also going to kind of give it a spoken review here today. And like I said at the beginning of the show, we will also be bringing in Jason Tagmeyer to talk about Pixel Lincoln and a few other things that he's working on. But let's dive in a little bit here on Pixel Lincoln. And it's interesting because since we've posted our review online, we've had some conversation with Jason about some of the things that we said, or more to the point, what Scott said. But so it'll be an interesting conversation here to talk a little more about Pixel Lincoln, and so let's dive into that. Do you want to start, or shall I?
Oh, I can start.
Okay, go for it.
So the idea here is it's a throwback to kind of the old 8-bit side-scrolling video games, Super Mario Brothers, and those sort of things. So in Pixel Lincoln, there are 2 levels, and you're making your way through the level to a mini boss, and then to the big boss of each level. And as you move along, you're gaining item cards and special weapons, and you're defeating enemies, and all of these are going into score piles or into your discard pile. And so there's some deck building to it. but I mean, we'll talk about that later, how it's kind of a deck builder, but not really a deck builder. But the point is that it really simulates this side-scrolling movement well, because as you're making your way through these cards, you get to the deck, and then everything behind you disappears, and you kind of go backward, and then you lay out new cards, and it's like you're moving along. It's like when you got to the edge of the screen in those old games, and the screen would load, and you keep going.
That's exactly it. There's hints of it that are deck building because of how you draw your hand and you keep your own deck, and cards that you purchase within the game go into your discard pile, but cards that you defeat actually go into a score pile and don't go into your hand. The components we talked about in some detail. There's a great layout. There's an actual level board that has spaces for all the cards for both levels. And one thing, I think I mentioned this in the written review, but a lot of times, like, we'll sit down to play Dominion or some deck builder, and one of my friends who plays a lot of games with me has always says, anytime we pull out a card game or a deck builder especially, man, I wish they would put boards in with these games that denoted where the cards go, because that would help set up so much more. Mm-hmm. And with this one, we actually get that board. We have a board that sets out where the cards go, and then you put these meeples on it that you get to move through and kind of determine where your space is. And it's interesting because I actually got a chance to play a prototype of this without the boards, without the meeples. And, so we're using markers or pawns or whatever I could kind of salvage or scrap from other games and whatnot. And it makes a difference when you have just kind of that set play area and being able to keep track of who's who and where they are in the level. Mm-hmm. So I love the board. It's double-sided, so there's two different images. They both serve the same purpose. We'll talk more about the meeples themselves a little later on, and the player boards a little later on. But I thought the quality of everything was it's well produced. The box is super heavy duty. There's plenty of room in it for expansions, and the artwork. I think that's one of the things we both agree on, is the artwork is fantastic on it. It's creative and colorful and imaginative, and the theme is what drew us to this game in the first place.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, that's the big thing here, is it's one of those games that if your group doesn't mind, if you're not going to take yourselves too seriously and you just want to go and have fun with a theme, then this is it. I mean, you're fighting puking turtles and laser sharks, and then you get to the boss and it's a T-Rex that's like wearing sunglasses and totally T-Rex.
And Pigeon Man, and yeah, it's all historically correct stuff too.
Oh yeah, definitely accurate for the time period. But and he has an unhealthy obsession with luchadors. But at any rate, it's a fun game. The theme is fun, and for our group, what ended up happening was, I mean, it's called Pixel Link in the deck building game. And so for our group, we kind of went in with this mindset of what it's going to be. It's going to be Dominion, or it's going to be Ascension, or any of these. And it really isn't. It's not. There aren't as many opportunities to build your deck as there are in those other games. So those other games have specific ways for you to call the bad cards that you start with and to really build your deck. And so by the end, you've created something that is going to help you get those victory point cards and things like that. And in this one, there aren't nearly as many opportunities to call and to kind of craft it. You're just kind of adding cards to it. And as Jeremiah said, the enemies don't go into your discard, they go into a score pile. So there's no strategic thought there about, well, maybe I don't want to take that guy at this point because he's going to clog my hand up. Nope. You pretty much want to hit him if he's going to give you victory points, because he goes into your score pile and doesn't affect you in any way. So when we got done, it was the group was kind of, they weren't real high on it, mostly because they went in with an expectation of what it was going to be, and that was a deck builder. And it's not that, so we kind of came out with a sour taste in our mouths, but the truth is, we just had wrong expectations for it.
Yeah, and I think we'll discuss that even more later on, but I think, as I've kind of said, if you kind of cover up that bottom of the box where it says the deck building game and just go, oh, it's Pixel Lincoln and it's a card game, and maybe it's an adventure card game. I think that if you go into it with that mindset, you're going to just have fun with it, and it's light enough that it can pull in. You can play it with younger gamers that maybe aren't going to get that nostalgia of this 8-bit side-scrolling thing. To them, they don't know what that is, but the theme and the nostalgia of it is going to pull in a casual gamer, because they're going to go, oh yeah, I remember, playing Super Mario Brothers or whatever Nintendo game I was playing back in the late 80s. And, so yeah, I think the theme of it and just that fun aspect of it, it keeps it light. It's not a heavy gamer game. It's just not Dominion. It's not, Ascension or Thunderstone or any of those. It's a fun game. It's an adventure game, and it's customizable. So you can have that different experience every time. And there's just a lot of goofiness to it too. That makes it a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So one of the things we were talking about was the meeples, and this is embarrassing for Jeremiah and myself, but we, in the written review and the video review, we both said, what's the deal with this meeple? It's kind of disappointing, because if there's anything we know about Lincoln, it's that he wore this giant stovepipe hat. And the meeples actually have kind of a rounded head, and it looks like he has an afro. And I don't think it was 30 minutes after we posted it, Jason Tagmeyer, the designer, texted Jeremiah and said, hey, just so you guys know, his hat was stolen by John Wilkes Booth, and that's what started the whole thing. It's it's on the back of the box and all this stuff, and we just completely missed it, and we just assumed, oh, what's with the shoddy meeple that they came up with? And then when he explained it, we just went, oh, we're idiots. So
yeah, as we're recording and I'm looking at the box, and there's all these images of cards and everything, and nowhere to be seen is the stovepipe hat. He is not wearing the hat anywhere in the game. And so you will never see him wearing the hat in the game. And therefore it would only make sense that the meeple wouldn't wear the hat. Somewhere deep inside of me, do I really want an Abraham Lincoln meeple with the top hat? You bet there is.
Yes.
But it's not going to happen with this game. So, kudos to Jason and Game Salute for sticking to their guns and maintaining that. And, yeah, we're a bunch of boneheads, because he's right there on the cover without his hat.
Just missed it.
So, yeah, I have always said this is just a fun game. This is don't go into it expecting a huge deck building experience. There are deck building aspects to it, like we've discussed, but if you're going to bring this game out with your younger kids or with some casual gamers, just you don't even have to go into the whole deck building side of it. Just go into it, say, hey, this is a fun card game. It's goofy. You're going to encounter puking turtles and luchadors, and you're going to grab a chicken cannon to destroy them, and just have fun with it that way. So I have enjoyed it, and I will continue to enjoy it and make my friends play it. So,
and I didn't enjoy it as much, and again, part of it was that the unmet expectations, but even beyond that, just in general, I'm not the kind of guy that's like, hey, let's play this game because it's really thematic and fun and lighthearted, and take that. And that's just not my personality. And so that's what this game is. I know that there are people that are going to love this game, including Jeremiah. And I totally think that's great. I love that they do, and I wish Jason all the best. It's just not my type of a game. So I'm going to have to give it a pass.
So there you go. I'm saying put it on the table. You're saying
keep it on the shelf.
Keep it on the shelf. So we actually have a copy to give away, and we want to thank Game Salute for providing us with an extra copy to give away to you guys, the listeners. And we are going to hold a fun little contest. If you go to our YouTube channel and check out our video review, here's how you can win the game. If you watch the video review, you'll know that by listening to this podcast, this is the only way you will find out how to win the game. What we want to do is we want to have you go and comment on our video review of Pixel Lincoln, the deck building game, and tell us who you think is right about this game. Is it me, the fun-loving, thematic game player, or
is it me, the grump, who doesn't like anything? Which is kind of
I wasn't going to say it.
Yeah.
But so let us know who you side with. If you think you're going to like this game, if you think, hey, I'd like a copy of that game because I know somebody that would like it, but I think I agree with Scott and it's probably not for me, let us know. We want to hear what you think about it and how that is, how our opinions are influencing what you think of this game. And we will pick a lucky commenter and send this off to you if you at least live in the United States, because the box is huge and it's going to cost us a small fortune to send it to you.
Yeah, so to reiterate, you have to be a subscriber to the YouTube channel.
Yes.
And then on the Pixel Lincoln video review, you either comment on it or you could even do a video response. Either one of those things would be perfectly acceptable for us. But you have to be a subscriber and do one of those other things, and you're eligible to win. And this is the only way you're going to find out how to do it. So only people listening to the podcast will know how to do it.
And I would even say this, too. Maybe you want to be creative in your response, and maybe you really want this game, but you just want to play the devil's advocate and agree with Scott. Go for that, too.
Wait, why am I the devil's advocate?
Because you didn't like it.
But maybe I'm right and you're wrong.
Oh, no. I'm right. Just trust me on this one.
History will prove one of us right, so we shall see who it is.
Just like Lincoln's hat.
Yes.
So go find us on YouTube. You can find us there at youtube.com/Theology of Games and subscribe to us and let us know what you think about our review and who you think is right and who you think is wrong. And
right.
I mean, we know who it is.
The contest ends on the night of November 20th.
We are going to be actually bringing in a special guest today. And on the line with us is the man, the myth, the legend, Jason Tagmeyer, designer of Pixel Lincoln, among other games that we'll be talking about today. But Jason, welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you today.
Hey, thank you so much.
We have both played Pixel Lincoln, and as a rarity, we have actually played this game together. We don't get to play many games together because we live in different states and all that. But the game had a soft open at Origins, and then you started shipping out to backers and so forth shortly after. How has that been going? How's that process been for you, kind of seeing this game, kind of a larger scale game for you, taken from Kickstarter all the way through to it's like in stores and stuff now? How's that gone for you?
It's kind of surreal. Like, I walked into my local game store for their big sale they had a couple weeks ago, and there were 3 copies on the shelf. I was just like, wow, this is crazy.
Awesome.
And then it was like a huge sale, and people lined around, and I kept walking by to see how many were left. I was like, I got to get out of here. I'm kind of getting mental. But yeah, it's being at Gen Con was crazy because I didn't expect there to be a massive stack of 100 copies of the game or so with a huge Pixel Ink and banner on top. It was one of the two games that Game Salute had that treatment on. It was that and Nothing Personal, which was just really neat. Just seeing it, so I was taking pictures and texting everybody who had any part in the game. Like,
awesome.
You got to see this. It's crazy.
That's
but
pretty good company to keep.
Yeah, well, it was, Nothing Personal has been doing really well, so.
Yeah.
But it was great to be in there with that, so I'm happy.
Very cool, very cool.
What's been the biggest lesson you've learned in this Kickstarter process?
Oh my God. With Kickstarter, there's so many. I've been, doing Kickstarter for a couple of years now, and I've been on kind of both sides of it with Pixel Ink, and I was a little bit more in the background, feeding a lot of things to Game Salute, but they ran the campaign. So with the Pixel Ink campaign, it took forever. It took almost a year to deliver, and we anticipated 6 months. And the biggest thing I learned from that was you have to pick a delivery date before you launch your Kickstarter, and your delivery date doesn't account for anything that you overfund with. So, for example, we asked for $5,000 and we got like $41,000. With that $41,000, we added boards to the game, the level tuck boxes, and all these other things. So the game was done when the Kickstarter launched, and after it finished, we had to make all this extra stuff, and it took a little while. So we didn't hit our mark, and it was simply because we did really well and had to make more stuff for the game. So I guess the biggest thing I learned from that was to allow extra time in case you do really well. Account for that extra time in your estimated delivery date, just in case you need to make more and add more to the game.
That's interesting. So we have reviewed the game already. We've posted our written review and our video review as well, and as well as we'll be talking more in depth about the game on the podcast here. We're giving Pixel Lincoln the full treatment, as it were. But one of the things that even I guess took issue with was Lincoln's head, the meeples. I expected a top hat, a stovepipe type of hat on him, and he's kind of got a round head. And when we posted the review online, shortly after, I received a text from you defending that, and just wanted to just kind of open that conversation up a little bit and see where that came from and how you guys ended up with a round-headed Abraham Lincoln meeple.
All right. There were a couple things that led to that, but first, you guys mentioned, he doesn't have a top hat, and that was a big. I don't know if it was exactly what you said, but just like a missed opportunity. But Lincoln just never has a top hat in the game, and you'll never see him with a top hat except for on the cheat code card that's called Silly Hat Mode. He's wearing the top hat on that card. That's the only time you'll ever see Lincoln wearing any sort of hat. And the reason for it is just the storyline for the video game version, and it kind of spilled into the board game version, is that John Wilkes Booth steals his hat in the beginning, and that's what sets time and space off, and you're just chasing it the whole time. It doesn't show through as much in the video game, so I don't fault you guys for not realizing that. It's one little blurb on the back of the box. But he just never has a hat. So we actually wanted to make a hat meeple that sits on the Pixel Lincoln meeple at some point, and the winner gets that hat. That was just something that Dan at Game Salute came up with at one point, and I've kind of always wanted to do it. But the actual meeple itself, it was supposed to be pixelated and look like a card that we had that was the Walking Lincoln card. And before we even had meeples in the game, you used cards where the meeples were, and you had to kind of shuffle the cards around. And at that point, the game was cards only. And our first stretch goal was we're going to replace these cards with meeples. So we wanted to do a 100% replica of the Walking Lincoln, and it was fully pixelated, and we thought this is great. So Kickstarter funds, we're working with Panda to make our game, and they're just like, it's really tough to get these pixels at such a small size. And they're like, we can do it, but the meeple has to be like 2 inches tall. And I was just like, and they made a sample of it. I have photos and everything, and it looks really cool, but the size was just massive. And then for the board to work, it was 2 inches tall, so it was a good inch wide. There wasn't, or it might even been wider than that. It wouldn't fit between the cards on the board. So then the board had to be bigger, which means the box had to be bigger. And it was just, we had to make the decision like, all right, we can't do pixels. So what can we do? So I took the pixelated Lincoln and rounded it out to get rid of the pixels. And the biggest thing that suffered in that was his head. And it looks like he's got this like afro thing going on right now. And if you look at the regular pixel Lincoln and put that in front of it, and if you round it out, it's pretty much exactly that. But it's just super round on the head and the most noticeable.
Sure.
So yeah, that's pretty much the story on it. And it turned out to be this kind of weird looking afro Lincoln, which I've adopted as my little child meeple, so I'm proud of it. But it's definitely something that, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, obviously.
Well, we felt bad about missing that, and we apologize for that.
Yeah, no. I'm sitting here looking at, I've got the box and I've got it open, and I'm starting to look through everything. I'm like, yeah, he's not wearing the hat anywhere. And it never dawned on me, like, oh, yeah, okay, so he's not wearing the hat.
The hat is, if you flip over the player boards, the hat is on the other side, the right side of the scoreboard. It's just like sitting there.
There it is. Yep. Interesting. So cool. That's, thank you for going into that with us. And, it's interesting because as a gamer and as a reviewer, we take a lot of things just at face value and kind of what our impressions are. And it's interesting to just hear some of that backstory on how you guys arrived at what is in this box. And so that's pretty cool.
I just assumed what set the whole thing off was the booth wanted to kill Lincoln.
It's a little lighter than that.
Right. No, I get it now. It's totally family friendly now. I get it.
The big opening of the video game, I haven't been a part of the video game day to day in a while, but when we started, I said, the game needs to open like this, and it's Lincoln's on a train, he looks out a window, the hat blows off his head, you see Booth grab it, and then it's boom, the game, it says go, full screen, and then the game starts. Now there's a little bit of a cutscene there, and you kind of see that Booth's like this prankster guy that's just always messing with Lincoln, and the final straw is he steals his hat, and that kind of sets the game off.
It makes so much more sense now. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Don't worry about it. I was listening to the Dice Tower the other day, and Tom Vassell was talking about how I don't even know which podcast it was, but how he's constantly like reading reviews of his game, Nothing Personal, and like, oh, every time someone says something, he's like, oh, well, that's, he has a reason to defend it or whatever. And then he thought about on the reviewer side, it's just like, that's what he does. So just listening to it, there's something I could say to everything that everyone says, but none of it, changes anything. None of it really matters, but there is some sort of weird backstory to every little part of it. Like, example, the little boards, the player boards, I think you guys said that there was nowhere to put the deck on there. Yes. And it was just simply, the box would have had to have been bigger if there was. So it just the box would have had to have been bigger, it would have more width, or if they folded, it would have had to be taller. So it was just one of those things that was the least important thing to sit on that mat and just could be set to the side. So, obviously not a perfect production not doing that, but there was all the crazy stuff that leads up to those things.
Sure.
That's funny because, as we sit here and play the games and whatnot, and we write a blog, and so any of the content that goes into the blog, we just write, and it's exactly what we want. So it's interesting to hear sort of the hurdles that you have to get through maybe compromise is the word that I'm looking for too, that sometimes just in the production and how it comes out in the final run, you just kind of have to compromise because of, box dimensions and whatever else goes into that. So that's really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. It goes down to, box dimensions, and then within that does that box fit into a shipping box, and, everything. It all
sure, because that could
downhill.
Impact the shipping costs and so forth and so on. So
exactly,
it's all a spiral.
Well, yeah. When I got my 2 copy, I got my copy and then the copy that we're giving away, but I didn't realize what it was, and this gigantic box comes in the mail. And I was like, what in the world could possibly be in here? So I open it up and I see that it picks Lincoln's on the top, and I thought, well, surely there's a bunch of padding in here. This couldn't be all box. Sure enough, it was 2 boxes stacked, no room, just gigantic boxes.
Yeah, it turned out really big. It looks nice on my shelf. But
yeah, I was going to say, it's very striking. It looks very nice on the game shelf, that's for sure.
I'm sure it's really expensive to ship.
I can't imagine. And plenty of room for expansions. Plenty.
Yes.
Which I'm looking at all piled up on my table right next to me.
Awesome.
Are there any you can share with us?
Sure. So I'm just kind of working out with Game Salute now, like how everything's going to work and all, but I basically designed just a whole ton of cards that can be used in whichever manner they decide to use them. Lots of more of the same, just more items and more enemies, characters and everything else, and then different cards like the environments that I know I've talked to you guys about before. Some, boss difficulty cards, some level difficulty cards, some alternate checkpoints that give, different abilities based off of who gets there first and who's in the level. So there's a whole bunch of new stuff as well as a whole bunch more of what we've already gotten there. And the big thing that I've kind of taken from just, watching and listening to reviews is just the variety within. So basically every new card has its own abilities on it. There's no 2 of the ones I've designed have any shared abilities.
That's cool.
Like, I'll give you a couple examples. Ability Splat. It's a falling cow. So the one level, you're on a train in the video game, there's all these cows that were falling on top of you from the sky. And Splat, once reached, you must immediately end your explore phase. So, if you're traveling through the level and there's all these cows, they slow you down considerably if you reach them. They splat on top of you. Time Cop, he's the guy that's in the video game. When you jump, you have to attach cards from your hand to him, and then whoever defeats him receives all the attached cards, which could allow you to cull cards or, obtain other ones for points, things like that.
Enjoy my bearderang, suckers.
Exactly. Hockey Man, I think he's actually called Goalie. He has Tag Team. And this was one that I wanted to put on a couple, but for now we're just doing one of each ability. Tag Team, when they're spawned, you flip over the next level card. If it's an enemy, you combine it with him. So you get these like super double enemies.
Cool.
Nice.
And then as far as items and all go, Flare Punch is one that I think is really cool. It's really cheap. It's like 1 coin to buy. It's just a better punch. The boxing glove, it's a 2-1 for 1 coin, but every time you buy it, you have to discard a card immediately. I'm sorry, every time you equip it, you have to discard a card. So it's super cheap to buy, but then affects you the whole game. There's so many here. Ollie, it's a Lincoln on a skateboard. It's a jump. It's a jump that has a power with it.
Awesome.
So you can hit the next guy that you jump over. Mystery Meat. There's a Bacon Shield.
Awesome. You got bacon into it.
I did. I
think we were talking about that last time, because wasn't there like some sort of bacon suit that was proposed? And
yeah, like the guys from Atari really wanted a bacon suit, and there's not enough pixels to show it, so I made the Bacon Shield, which looks really cool.
That's awesome.
And yeah, there's a ton of them. There's a ghost. There's ladders. Ladders are probably the coolest, where you just go from one level to the other, but directly up or down.
Cool. That's cool. That kind of gives you a little bit more option to, get out of a level that you may be feeling stuck in or whatnot.
Exactly.
That's a cool option to have there.
Just
So I wanted to bring up too. We talked about in our review. We talked about the fact that this is called Pixel Link in the deck building game, and in a lot of ways, it is, and it is also not a deck building game. And what were your thoughts on that, and how did you kind of land on that as the name of this game? And what would you say to somebody who's going into this expecting Dominion or Ascension or something like that?
All right, so the name came from basically just differentiating itself from Pixel Lincoln the video game. Pixel Lincoln the video game is just called Pixel Lincoln, so there needed to be something to differentiate that. So then it could have been Pixel Lincoln the card game, but I feel like card game you think like poker or something. So just the title card game, and it could have been Pixel Lincoln the board game. But when we first decided to launch the Kickstarter and all, there was no such thing as a board. It was just the deck of 216 cards. So it used a deck building mechanic in that everybody starts with 5 cards and ends with, whatever they've built over the course of the game. So it could have been called Pixel Lincoln the game with the deck building mechanic within. But we just kind of went with Pixel Lincoln the deck building game. I kind of love that whole cheesy Spaceballs-ish, Spaceballs the action figure, Spaceballs the whatever. So like Pixel Lincoln the deck building game, Pixel Lincoln the bicycle deck, Pixel Lincoln the video game, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just for simplicity. And so at the time, deck building there were only a couple out when we kind of made this, and the instant comparison would have been, Dominion and Ascension, and I guess a couple others. And then since then, DC and Marvel and everything came out. So the problem with the title, where it kind of falls short, is for gamers, they see the deck building game and it's going to get an instant comparison to most likely Ascension and Dominion. For non-gamers, it almost doesn't mean anything. So while I think the game's kind of in that mid-range, it'll work for, it's usually probably like lighter gamers and their friends. The name doesn't do anything for either of them. To do something for non-gamers, deck building doesn't mean anything. And for gamers, it just gets that instant comparison. A lot of people who've played it said, it's a great, some people would, I don't remember who it was that just reviewed it, but they said if they were teaching a deck building game and it was this or Dominion, they'd definitely go with this, just because it's got the theme that'll suck in, the people who've never played a game before, which I think is a huge compliment, and that's awesome. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. Just kind of reach those video game gamers that don't really play board games. So if I can do that, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Well, that's definitely what happened with my group. Is we are longtime Dominion fans, and some of the guys are pretty hardcore into it, and so they showed up and were like, "Oh, deck building game," and so they just had this idea of what it was going to be, and it wasn't that at all. And I think that's a major part of why they were so disappointed. It's not necessarily the game's fault; it's just an expectation that was different than what they planned on.
Yeah, looking back, if I could swap that title out, I probably would, and I think things would just be a little bit different in at least the expectations.
Yeah, I feel I feel the same. I feel like it's. I think what I said is it's more of an adventure card game in a way where, thematically it's gonna pull in players who are not necessarily gamers or have a deep idea of what a deck builder is, because the theme is nostalgic in a way because of the pixelated 8-bit thing, and it simulates. I think the thing that really stands out in the game is the way that it really accurately or simulates an old side scroller video game. You know, if you get to a certain point and things that are on the screen leave the left side of the screen, they're gone, and you can't go back and get those. You can't go back and defeat that guy. It's just, you just keep going on.
Yeah.
And so I think I loved the way that felt, because to me it was like, wow, this is an analog version of a side scroller, and it's exactly what I would expect in that. You know, yes, there is a deck building mechanic somewhere in there with, you know, some of the cards you gather going into your deck and, you know, showing up later again. But I feel I agree with what you were saying, that yeah, it's something that might pull somebody in that wouldn't necessarily sit down and play Dominion, because, I mean, let's face it, Dominion thematically is not all that interesting.
Boring.
Right. Like, oh, I'm going to buy a duchy. Oh, good for you. But
I always
hey,
buy the duchy.
Right. But I'm going to defeat this puking turtle and the hip hop robot. And, you know, those are fun and interesting and creative and all that. So I think that's really where Pixel Lincoln shines, is thematically, and I just love the ingenuity of how you put together that side-scrolling mechanic to really simulate, this is how these old games worked. And, you know, for me, that was my childhood, Super Mario Brothers, you know, so
Yeah.
it was very cool.
Cool. Thank you.
So you have another game that is on the market, and actually pretty, there's quite a bit of buzz about it. Maximum Throwdown, that has been released by AEG. How are things going with that? What's the word on the street that you've been hearing? And what's the future of that game? Is there more Maximum Throwdown ever on the horizons for you, or what are you kind of thinking there?
So the word on it is, it's out. It's been, I don't know how it's doing, because I don't, you know, that's not my area. I'm just the designing it. But, it's cool. I mean, I've been playing it everywhere with people. I mean, I've been seeing tons of, this week has been crazy with the reviews on it. They've just been coming out, you know, one after another. And most reviews kind of say the same thing, where it's like, if you like deck building, not deck building, I'm still stuck on Pixel Lincoln. If you like dexterity games, you know, you're going to like it. If you don't like dexterity games, you won't, which is, I guess you could say that about any dexterity game.
Sure.
But I mean, reviews have been really positive. Everyone has a lot of fun with it. The people that, I don't know, it's just been really cool. So I went to a game night the other night in Philly, and it's kind of a game night where you go and there's 50 people there, and just games are on a pile when you walk in, and there were 4 copies of Maximum Throwdown on that pile.
Wow.
It was like, all right, I know what we're playing tonight. But it was cool, though. It was everything's been going really well with it. As far as the future goes, I'm constantly designing more stuff, and, you know, whatever happens. You know, I'm going to talk to AEG and everything, and, you know, communicate with them on that. So I have more cards designed, more special powers, but I don't think anything's set in stone right now.
Awesome.
I haven't played it yet, but I certainly want to. I do like dexterity games.
I thought I was going to ask you, do you like dexterity games?
I do. Well, I was reading comments on The Geek, and one guy's like, "Here, I'm going to give this a 2. I don't like dexterity games." And I'm like, "Well, why did you play it?"
Yeah, I saw that one too, and I was just like, "Oh man, that stinks."
Right.
Right.
You know,
way to throw the curve there, buddy. You know.
But I do. I mean, I liked Flowerfly. I thought that was interesting. So to add, you know, new twist to that is a great idea. I'm really looking forward to playing it.
Yeah, I've never played Flowerfall, so I know that they're pretty similar, but I think quite different in the scoring and everything.
So did you come up with the idea independently, or had you heard about Flowerfall and then came up with it?
No, I actually heard about Flowerfall like after it was already with AEG, and had an email from someone that said, "Oh, check this out."
Huh, that's cool.
And I was like, "Oh, wow."
It looks like I ripped that off.
Yeah, exactly. And then I played with some people at, I guess it was Origins this year, and they were just like, does Carl know about this? Designer of Flowerfall. And I was
Right.
like, I don't know because I didn't know about that. And they were like texting him right there. And he's like, well,
Oh, wow.
I think he said it was, bound to happen at some point.
That's awesome.
But from what I hear, and I've, watched videos and all since, but Maximum Throwdown, you obviously have the special powers and everything, but scoring is considerably different, and it's throwing instead of dropping. So
Right.
at least, it's different enough.
Yeah, I'm not accusing you of stealing. I think it's great.
No, I know.
And and you and I got a chance to kind of go through the mechanics of it and get a little peek at it, and I thought it was really interesting. And I haven't played a lot of dexterity games, but the ones that I've seen and kind of gotten my hands on, I've enjoyed. So I'm looking forward to getting our hands on Maximum Throwdown hopefully soon.
Cool.
Looks like a very cool game. So
Thanks.
congratulations on that. It's kind of a big deal,
It's this huge deal for me. It's great. I mean,
Yeah.
thrilled.
So another game that you're involved with is Pigpen, and Scott and I both played that and really enjoyed it. Our kids love it.
Cool.
How are things going with that? I know you guys finished up your Kickstarter a little while ago.
So we're in the, sending everything to the manufacturer phase. Me and Kevin just wrapped up. I guess I don't think this has ever been said out loud, but I'm the co-designer of the UFO expansion.
Okay.
Me and Kevin did that together. And we played it the other night with the UFO expansion, and Kevin's like, I'm never playing it without this expansion ever again.
Nice.
Because it's basically like it adds a little co-op to it, to where these UFOs come out in the middle of the field, and the UFO says what it takes, and it might say steals the biggest pig out in play.
Wow.
And then every time another UFO card comes out, it repeats that action. So it's stealing all these pigs, and then you're constantly throwing your attacks on the UFO instead, because if you get those pigs, they go to your house. There's just a card called the house, and then at the end of the game, they're your points. So you can never lose those pigs after you steal them back from the UFO. They're kind of like recovering from being abducted in your house. So there's a huge battle for them once the UFO starts stealing them. And the UFO has 20 points, so you're just throwing attacks down turn after turn. And it adds this weird little, interaction that's not there in the base game.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that does sound really interesting.
I think we did enough on the Kickstarter that we can put that in basically every copy. So
Cool.
Nice.
kind of working on that now.
Excellent. Yeah, we were really, really high on that game. We had a lot of fun with it, and our children just turned into evil little take that machines when we play that game. So
All logic goes out the window. Son,
Yeah,
your mom
it's
is
just-
winning and she's about to win. I don't care. I'm going to destroy your fence, Daddy. Okay.
I think it was
Yeah,
one of you
just-
guys said that, where it's basically just kids attack the adults.
Yes.
yeah, they just at one point the first time I played it was just me and my boys. My 5-year-old just looks at my oldest son and goes, "Hey, let's just beat up on Daddy's pens." And I went from having 3 completed pens to a couple gates and some feed in one turn. It was just lights out. I was like, oh my goodness. So yeah, they have definitely learned the art of take that and gang up on Daddy through the game. So
It's such a
thank you for that.
brutal yet pleasant game.
Yeah.
It's very innocently brutal is
Yeah.
how I would describe it.
It was probably 4 years ago. I saw Kevin. It was one of the first times I met him. He was at a local convention with his family selling the game, and it was just the neatest thing seeing him there with this game, and he was selling it. And just from then, we kind of connected. We talked, and I was like, let's do this game for real, because I don't know what he spent on it, but I know he spent way too much money and was basically selling them at cost for probably $20 a copy. So, we worked it out with Island officials to eventually do the release. So he's excited. I'm excited. They're excited. It's cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm super glad that it's making it to market and that it'll get a larger audience, through the Kickstarter and through Island officials and everything.
Definitely.
Because it's just a solid game. It's good family fun. So good stuff. Well, I think that is all the time we have for this time.
We really appreciate you coming on, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys for giving Pixelinkin the full treatment.
Absolutely. We're super excited to be able to do that and give it away to a lucky listener. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit on how you can win your copy of Pixelinkin. But we just, again, want to thank our special guest, our very first interview on the podcast, Jason Tagmeyer. Thanks so much for stopping by and giving us some time tonight.
Thank you guys, as always.
Thanks, man. Take care.
You too.
Shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Let's move on. Moving right along.
So our question of the month is a holdover from last podcast. We had a lot of questions and one heavy one that we thought, all right, let's just save the rest of this one for later. And so I believe this was Mark Jackson, wasn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Yes, our friend Mark Jackson, he asked us, why youth ministry? Why are both of us involved in youth ministry, feel like we are called in some capacity to youth ministry? And so we are going to tell you if you care. And if you don't care, you can just stop the podcast now and we'll see you later. So do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll tackle this first because it's actually, it's kind of an exciting time for me right now. I think I mentioned in our very first episode that I have been out of youth ministry professionally, or I don't know if professionally is the right word, but I have not been on staff serving in a youth ministry capacity since last December. But I have just recently, and by the time this goes live, I'll be announcing via social media and whatever, so I can say it here tonight and without kind of jumping the gun. But I've recently accepted a position, an interim position at a church to run their youth ministry as they transition. The whole church itself is kind of going through a transition, finding a new senior pastor and a new youth pastor. So I will be the interim youth pastor there. And so that's cool. But why youth ministry? Why not? But I got kind of into youth ministry sort of through the side door. My wife actually was working with a small group of girls shortly after we got married. She started meeting with this small group in a volunteer's house. And about a month or so after that, she talked to me and she said, "Hey, what do you think about volunteering in the youth ministry?" And, I went through that time that I think a lot of people do when they're 18 or 19 and they think that teenagers are smelly and full of themselves and whatever. But after getting married and growing up a little bit and realizing that I was just being stupid, I really saw the need that a lot of teenagers have and for just voices of truth in their life. And so a lot of times it's easy to say, just point fingers at a younger generation and say they don't know anything or they're a bunch of screw ups or this or that. But a lot of times what teenagers just need is a voice of truth in their life that will speak love to them, but speak truth to them. And so we started youth ministry, and that was going on 11 years ago now. And it's the more that I've been involved with youth ministry, the more God has just showed to me that that's the calling He's put on my life. And when you get into ministry as a vocation or as, the ministry world, a lot of people there's this idea that youth ministry is just a stepping stone to something different, to an associate pastor and then to a senior pastor. I believe that that's the calling that God's put on my life. And it's not a rung on a ladder for me. It's what God put me here on this earth to do, is to love teenagers and to point them to Jesus and the saving grace of the cross. And so why not? What else would I do? And that's youth ministry for me.
Preach it.
That was a long-winded response.
That was good. For me, I'm not called to youth ministry, but I certainly am called to help in youth ministries. I love my kids and I've helped out in their classes, but when I think about helping out in the children's ministry at church, I just shudder. I can't handle that. And I'm sure people feel the same way about youth ministry. But for me, my family kind of went to church off and on as I was growing up. But when I started going to youth group with a friend, and I was led to the Lord when I was in high school by a guy that just gave a crap, and I wouldn't be here right now if he hadn't done that and taken the time to deal with me. And I had a goofball best friend that he would take us to Denny's, and we'd meet on Wednesday afternoons and just have Cokes and talk about life. And then one day he pulled out, one of those classical tracts about, here's the cross, crossing the chasm between you and God, and all that.
Right.
Hey, it worked on me. And if he hadn't cared enough to do that, I don't know where I'd be right now in my life. So I feel like, maybe I can be that person to some other kid and change their trajectory. And so my wife and I volunteer with the youth ministry. She teaches a small group of girls, and I teach a small group of guys, and we both help out on retreats and trips and things like that. And yeah, they're goofy and annoying and smelly and all that stuff, but I can't imagine, working with any other group in the church and spending my time with. It's incredibly rewarding and frustrating at the same time, but I feel like, this is where I need to be. And then as a vocation, I am an editor on Group Magazine, which is for youth pastors. And so I'm deeply embedded in that culture there as well, where, we eat and breathe and talk youth ministry all the time. So I'm surrounded by it, and I'm in it deep. So that's why youth ministry for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's it is. There's days where it's really taxing, because when you're doing ministry with people and teenagers, it gets messy. You're doing life together, and that's just how it is. But there's days you're like, man, I get to do this. I'm really doing this right now. It's just that cool, and you stand back and you go, wow. I can't believe that I'm privileged to be a part of this bigger thing that's way bigger than me. And, just the impact that you have on people's lives, and God just uses you through that. So
absolutely.
It's pretty awesome.
Thanks for the question, Mark. And if anyone else has any questions, just shoot them to us, and we will be happy to answer them on the future podcasts. And they don't have to be about life outside of gaming. They can be directly involved with gaming or ministry or lives or family or anything. We don't care. We want to talk about everything.
Yeah. Favorite ice cream flavor, mint chocolate chip. But, I guess they're not going to answer.
Not true.
Yeah.
It's cookie dough. But anyway.
Oh, okay. But yeah, shoot us those questions anywhere that you can find us online. We would love to continue to conversate with you, our listeners and our readers and everything. We can't do this without you, like literally. So, please feel free to hit us up, and nothing is off the table when it comes to that. You can ask us anything. So please fire away.
We may not answer, but you are welcome to ask.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we are going to wrap it up now. And is there anything else you want to talk about, Jeremiah? I
think that's going to cover it. come back next month for our 4th episode, where we will be reviewing. We're going to give the full treatment this time to Asgard's Chosen from Mayfair Games. And we will be reviewing that and talking about that game, which just released sometime a few weeks ago from when you'll be hearing this.
Yeah, it's been really quiet. Like, it's totally flown under the radar. So nobody knows about this game, including us, but we'll find out and let you know about it.
Yeah, and looking forward to giving it a play. They actually tout that it's a clever game, so I love clever games, and I'm hoping I'll love this one too. So stay tuned for that, and again, hit us up on YouTube. Let us know what you think about our review of Pixel Lincoln, and you could score your very own copy of Pixel Lincoln.
Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you guys later.
Yep, and we want to thank again our special guest, Jason Tagmeyer, and we will see you guys out there on the internets. Have a good day.
Bye.
We'll see you soon. Later.
You've been listening to the Theology of Games podcast with Jeremiah Isley and Scott Firestone. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd appreciate your subscription to the podcast and your review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day, and until next time, get a game on the table.
Game boxes should be measured by muscle figures.